Sometimes the hardest truth to face is not the words people say, but the way they make us feel when they're around. You know that quiet tension in the room when someone close to you smiles at you, but it doesn't reach their eyes? Or when every conversation feels like you're walking on thin ice, careful not to crack something you can't see. It's in the little sighs, the dismissive glances, the way they shrink your victories or twist your mistakes into reminders of your flaws. And you start to wonder if it's all in your head, if maybe you're just too sensitive, if maybe you're imagining it, but deep down, your body knows. Your heart knows, the energy shifts, and it wears on you more than words ever could. This is where the quiet pain lives, in the space between what's said and what's truly felt. And when you love someone who secretly resents you, the silence can cut deeper than any open conflict ever would. When it comes to relationships, the hardest part isn't always the fights or the disagreements you can see. It's the quiet unease you can't quite put your finger on. It's when someone you care about leaves you feeling smaller every time you're around them, but they never say it out loud. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you misunderstood or if you're just imagining the coldness you feel. That's the confusing part, when the outside looks fine, but inside you can feel the distance growing. And most people never talk about it, because how do you call out something that isn't being said? This is where so many people carry silent pain, trying to love someone who may not truly want the best for them. That's why we need to bring clarity to it, not to accuse, not to start a fight, but to recognize what's really happening so you can stop doubting yourself and start protecting your peace. There are moments in relationships when silence has more than any argument ever could. Not the peaceful kind of silence that feels safe, but the heavy kind that lingers after something important should have been said and wasn't. You feel it in the pit of your stomach. The sigh that never comes with words, the look that answers your question before you even finish asking it. And over time, you start carrying that weight yourself, filling in the blanks with doubt, fear, or blame. That's the weight of words that were never said. Unspoken words have a way of shaping how we see ourselves. When someone close to you holds back the truth, whether it's love they don't give, hurt they won't name, or resentment they won't own, the silence leaves you guessing. And when you're left guessing long enough, you stop trusting your own instincts. You start wondering, am I overreacting? Did I do something wrong? Maybe it's not as bad as it feels. That confusion is exhausting because you're not fighting an actual argument. You're fighting shadows. Shadows that keep you up at night, wondering if you're valued the same way you value them. The hard part is that silence doesn't erase the truth. It only pushes it underground. And what goes underground doesn't disappear. It leaks out in little ways. In the tone of their voice when they say your name, in the way they dismiss your excitement when you share good news, in how they avoid eye contact when you're vulnerable. Those are the unsaid words talking. And when you love someone, those small signals can feel louder than any fight because you're left carrying all the meaning they refuse to put into words. There's also a cost to staying quiet when you're the one who feels the weight. Maybe you've noticed the shift, but you're afraid to bring it up because you don't want to start a conflict. Or maybe you've convinced yourself that silence is safer than being shut down. But holding it in doesn't protect the relationship. It just builds a quiet wall between you and the other person, brick by brick, moment by moment, until the connection you once had starts to feel out of reach. What makes this so painful is that unspoken words don't just keep the truth hidden. They keep healing hidden too. A wound can't be treated if it's never named. Hurt can't be repaired if it's never acknowledged. And love can't grow if it's never expressed. That's why silence can be so destructive. Not because it's loud, but because it robs you of the chance to deal with what's real. The way forward isn't about demanding confessions or forcing conversations. It's about choosing to live in truth, even if that truth is uncomfortable. It's about trusting yourself enough to name what you feel and to listen to what your body already knows. And sometimes it's about accepting that if someone close to you won't speak their truth, you don't have to keep living under the weight of their silence. You can step out from under it, because your peace doesn't depend on the words they refuse to say. It depends on the words you choose to honor in yourself. Respect doesn't usually vanish in one big moment. It slips away slowly in ways that are easy to overlook at first. A sarcastic comment that cuts a little deeper than it should. A tone that sounds more dismissive than loving. The way your opinion is brushed aside like it doesn't matter. One moment doesn't destroy respect, but repeated moments chip away at it until you wake up one day and realize the foundation of your relationship doesn't feel steady anymore. And what makes it harder is that it often happens so quietly. You can't point to the exact time it began. You just know things don't feel the same. The quiet disappearance of respect shows up in the small interactions that make up everyday life. Maybe it's the way they interrupt you when you're sharing something important, as if your words are less valuable. Maybe it's how they roll their eyes when you try to set a boundary. Maybe it's the criticism tucked into jokes that leave you wondering if they even see you as an equal anymore. None of these things look like explosions. They look like little cracks. But little cracks left ignored turn into deep fractures. And those fractures create distance where closeness used to be. When respect fades, love doesn't always leave right away. That's what makes it so confusing. You can still care for someone deeply while feeling like they no longer treat you with dignity. And part of you starts bargaining with yourself. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe this is just how they are. Maybe this is normal. But deep down, you know the truth. You feel smaller around them than you used to. You second guess your words before you speak. You stop sharing parts of yourself because you don't want them minimized. And that shrinking of yourself is the cost of lost respect. It's important to name this because respect is the soil relationships grow in. Without it, love can feel conditional, safety can feel fragile, and trust can feel one-sided. And the longer you tolerate disrespect, even in its subtle forms, the more it teaches the other person that this behavior is acceptable. Not because you're weak, but because silence often gets mistaken for agreement, and you're left holding the quiet pain of being in a relationship that looks fine on the outside but feels heavy on the inside. The truth is, respect isn't about grand gestures. It's about the everyday choices we make and how we talk to each other, how we listen, how we value each other's feelings. When those choices stop showing up, the relationship slowly erodes, even if the love is still there, and you can't build intimacy on eroded ground. The way forward starts with honesty. With yourself first, naming that what you're experiencing isn't just moodiness or stress, it's the loss of respect. From there, you get to decide what you will and won't accept. That doesn't mean picking a fight or demanding perfection. It means protecting your dignity by drawing lines that keep the soil of your relationship healthy. Because love without respect isn't sustainable. And the moment respect quietly disappears, you have to decide whether you'll let that silence keep growing or whether you'll stand up for the kind of relationship you know you deserve. There's a kind of smile that looks warm on the outside, but feels cold underneath. You've probably seen it, maybe even lived with it. It's the smile that says everything's fine, while the air between you carries something different. At first, you want to believe it's real. You want to take it at face value because the person smiling at you is someone close, someone you love, and believing the smile is easier than questioning what's behind it. But over time, you start to notice the mismatch. The words sound polite, the gestures look familiar, but the connection that used to feel natural now feels forced. That's the distance hidden behind a smile. The hardest part about this kind of distance is how invisible it can be to everyone else. To the outside world, things might look perfectly fine. Family dinners still happen, conversations still flow on the surface. The photos still show two people standing close together, but you know the truth. Closeness in appearance doesn't equal closeness in spirit. You can sit right next to someone and feel miles away. When the distance hides behind kindness or charm, it leaves you questioning whether you're imagining it, because it's hard to name something you can't clearly see. This hidden distance shows up in small, everyday ways. When you share good news and their smile feels more like politeness than genuine excitement. When you express hurt and their nod feels like tolerance instead of understanding. When laughter fills the room but never quite reaches their eyes. These are the little signals that tell you, we're not where we used to be. And the silence that follows those signals is often louder than any argument because it tells you that something has shifted, something they're not willing, or maybe not able, to name. What makes this dynamic so painful is the mixed message it sends. A smile is supposed to mean acceptance, warmth, even love. But when the smile masks resentment, indifference, or disengagement, your heart picks up on it before your head does, and it leaves you in a confusing place. Do you trust their smile, or do you trust the pit in your stomach that tells you something isn't right? Do you keep going along with the surface level peace, or do you risk disrupting it by bringing up the gap you feel? That tension can leave you exhausted, because no matter which way you turn, it feels like you're carrying the weight of the truth alone. Here's what we often miss: distance doesn't always show up through fighting, slamming doors, or angry words. Sometimes it hides in politeness, in going through the motions, in pretending everything is fine. And the longer it hides, the more it erodes trust, because relationships can't thrive on appearances. They thrive on honesty, even when honesty is hard. The step forward isn't about ripping the mask off someone else's smile. It's about paying attention to what your own heart is telling you. It's about recognizing when connection has been replaced by a performance and deciding whether you're willing to keep living with that distance. You don't have to accuse or attack. You don't even have to have all the answers. But you do have to honor yourself enough to stop pretending the smile is enough, because love without authenticity can't sustain closeness. And sometimes the most honest thing you can do is name the distance, even if they refuse to. That's how you protect your peace, by refusing to let a smile convince you the relationship is healthier than it really is. One of the quietest shifts that can happen in a relationship is when genuine care gets replaced with dismissal. It doesn't usually happen in an obvious way. At first, it might look like a simple brush off, a quick, "You're overthinking it." When you share what's on your heart, or distracted, "You'll be fine," when you're carrying something heavy. But over time, those little moments add up, and instead of feeling heard and supported, you start to feel like your emotions are an inconvenience. What used to be a space where your feelings mattered now feels like a place where they're minimized. That's what it looks like when care quietly turns into dismissal. The pain here isn't just in the words used. It's in the message underneath them. When someone you love consistently downplays what you're feeling, the message you receive is, your emotions don't have weight. Your needs don't deserve attention. And even if that's not what they intend, that's what it feels like. Slowly, you begin questioning whether you're allowed to take up emotional space in the relationship. You learn to hold things in, not because you want to, but because you're tired of being made to feel dramatic, sensitive, or needy. And that silence you start carrying, it's heavy. Dismissal doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from discomfort. Some people aren't equipped to handle emotions, their own or anyone else's, so they push them away. They minimize, they distract, they change the subject. And while it might look like indifference, it's really avoidance. The problem is, avoidance doesn't make the need disappear. It just leaves the other person carrying it alone. And in relationships, nothing creates loneliness faster than realizing the person closest to you won't sit with you in what matters most. Think about the difference between someone saying, "That sounds really hard, I'm here with you," versus, "You're making this a bigger deal than it is." The first makes you feel safe. The second makes you feel small. That's the line between genuine care and dismissal. Care doesn't always fix the problem, but it validates the person. Dismissal doesn't fix the problem either. It just invalidates the person. And when you're invalidated long enough, you stop bringing pieces of yourself forward. The relationship gets quieter, not because there's peace, but because one of you has stopped showing up fully. This is why dismissal is so damaging. It doesn't break trust with one big event. It erodes it slowly, moment by moment, until the closeness that once felt natural now feels risky. And the more you adapt to avoid dismissal, the more the relationship shifts out of balance. You're still giving care, still showing up, but you're not receiving it back. And that imbalance wears you down. The way through this is not about demanding the other person become perfect with your feelings. It's about recognizing the difference between care and dismissal and being honest about the effect it has on you. It's about remembering that your emotions are not too much, your needs are not too heavy, and your heart is not an inconvenience. And if someone close to you continues to replace care with dismissal, you don't have to accept that as love, because real love makes room for your feelings. It doesn't shrink them. It doesn't silence them. It honors them, just as you deserve to be honored. Trust doesn't usually shatter all at once. Most of the time, it wears down slowly in ways that are easy to excuse in the moment, but impossible to ignore over time. It's the promise that was broken but brushed off as no big deal. It's the private detail you shared in confidence that somehow made its way into a casual conversation with others. It's the reassurance they gave you, only to act in a way that didn't line up with their words. None of these things seem catastrophic by themselves, but together they create a pattern, and patterns are what your heart pays attention to, even when your mind tries to justify them away. The erosion of trust is subtle because it doesn't always look like betrayal. It often looks like inconsistency. When someone tells you one thing and does another, you're left wondering which version to believe. And when that happens enough, you stop taking comfort in their words. You start scanning their actions for the truth instead. That shift might seem small, but it changes everything. Because trust at its core is about feeling safe enough not to question, not to doubt, not to monitor. Once that safety is gone, even the simplest interactions can feel uncertain. This kind of erosion shows up in little cracks. They say they'll be there on time, but they're not. They agree with you in private, then side against you in front of others. They reassure you with kindness, then undermine you with a joke. Each crack chips away at the foundation, and even if you tell yourself it's minor, your body still registers it. You start feeling tense when they speak, guarded when you share, hesitant when you rely on them. That's the cost of eroded trust. It changes not only how you see them, but how you show up in the relationship. What makes this so heavy is that trust is fragile in a way respect or even love sometimes isn't. Love can stay through conflict. Respect can be rebuilt through effort. But once trust has been worn thin, every repair takes more energy, more consistency, more time than the last. And if the other person doesn't recognize how their choices, even the small ones, are impacting you, the erosion continues. Even if they still care, it's also worth noticing that sometimes the erosion isn't malicious. People break trust out of habit, carelessness, or because they've never had to think about the weight of their words. But intention doesn't erase impact. The impact is still yours to carry. The doubt, the unease, the hesitancy. And carrying that for too long begins to reshape who you are in the relationship. You're no longer open, you're guarded. You're no longer relaxed, you're cautious. And over time, that distance changes the closeness you once relied on. The only way forward is through honesty and consistency. Not the kind that makes promises in the moment, but the kind that shows up day after day in action. And if the other person won't do the work to rebuild what's been eroded, you have to decide what that means for you. Because trust isn't just a nice extra in a relationship. It's the ground you stand on. And if the ground keeps crumbling beneath you, you don't have to keep pretending it's stable. You deserve the kind of trust that doesn't need to be questioned, the kind that holds steady, not just in words, but in actions. Support is supposed to feel like a safe place, the kind of space where you can bring your wins, your dreams, your struggles, and know they'll be met with care. But sometimes, without anyone saying it out loud, that support shifts into something else. Instead of encouragement, you start to feel comparison. Instead of being celebrated, you feel measured. And all of a sudden, the person you thought was in your corner feels more like they're standing across from you, keeping score. That's what it looks like when support quietly turns into silent competition. It often shows up in the small moments. You share good news about something you've been working toward, and instead of joining in your joy, they respond with their own achievement, as if your win is just a reminder of what they need to prove. You talk about a goal you're excited about, and their response isn't curiosity, it's subtle one, upmanship. Well, I've done that before, or that's nothing compared to what I'm working on. On the surface, the words might seem harmless. But underneath, you feel the shift. What should have been a shared moment now feels like a contest you never agreed to enter. The painful part about this dynamic is that it leaves you second guessing what you share. You start to hold back your excitement, not because you're not proud, but because you don't want your joy turned into a comparison. You stop leaning on them for encouragement because you know it won't feel like encouragement anymore. And that distance changes the relationship. Where you once felt safe, you now feel guarded. Where you once felt supported, you now feel like you have to downplay yourself to keep the peace. What makes this especially heavy is that competition isn't always aggressive or obvious. Sometimes it hides behind jokes, playful comments, or even quiet indifference, but you can feel it. You can feel when someone isn't really happy for you, when their smile is polite but not genuine, when their affirmation is laced with envy, and you start to realize that the bond you thought was built on mutual care might have cracks in it. Cracks formed by insecurity, resentment, or the inability to celebrate without comparing. It's important to name this because silent competition doesn't just harm the relationship, it harms you. It teaches you to shrink yourself, to tone down your wins, to soften your light so it doesn't make someone else uncomfortable. And when you do that long enough, you start to lose touch with your own sense of worth, measuring yourself by how little space you take up instead of by the joy of being fully alive. The truth is, healthy relationships don't make you choose between love and authenticity. They let you be both, celebrated in your highs and held in your lows. When support turns into silent competition, you're left carrying the weight of someone else's insecurity, and that isn't yours to carry. You can choose to stop playing in a competition you never signed up for. You can choose to share your wins with people who don't just tolerate them, but genuinely cheer them on. Because real support doesn't measure itself against you. It stands beside you proud, present, and unshaken. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being right next to someone you love and realizing they don't really see you anymore. You talk, you laugh, you share a life together on the surface, but underneath, something feels hollow. The conversations stay shallow, the moments feel routine, And when you try to open up, it doesn't land the way you need it to. That's where loneliness of being unseen in a close relationship, not the absence of presence, but the absence of connection. Being unseen shows up in the smallest details. You tell a story that matters to you, and they barely look up from their phone. You mention a dream, and it's met with silence, or worse, a quick change of subject. You drop hints about how tired, stressed, or hurt you are, and those hints slip right past them, like your feelings never even entered the room. And while none of these moments are loud enough to look like rejection, together they leave you with the quiet ache of being invisible. You start to wonder if your words matter, if your emotions register, if your presence truly counts in the way theirs does for you. What makes this loneliness cut so deep is that it's layered with contradiction. You're not abandoned, but you feel abandoned. You're not ignored, but you feel ignored. The routines of life keep going. Meals are shared, chores get done, conversations happen, yet the deeper parts of you feel untouched. It's confusing because everything looks fine, but inside, you feel the ache of being emotionally alone. And the more you try to convince yourself that it's normal, the heavier that ache becomes. Often, being unseen isn't about malice. It can come from distraction, from stress, from someone being caught up in their own world. But even if it's unintentional, the impact is the same. You can only go so long feeling overlooked before it starts to wear on you. And here's the truth, being unseen doesn't just make you feel lonely, it makes you doubt your own worth in the relationship. You begin to shrink your voice, stop sharing your heart, and tell yourself, why bother? They're not listening anyway. That self-silencing is where the real damage takes root. The reason this matters so much is because closeness requires more than physical presence. It requires attention. It requires care. It requires one person looking at the other and saying, I see you and you matter. Without that, a relationship becomes a partnership of tasks, not a connection of souls. And while tasks can keep people under the same roof, they can't keep hearts truly together. The way forward isn't about demanding constant attention or expecting someone to meet every emotional need. It's about naming the ache honestly, first to yourself and then to them. It's about saying, I feel unseen and I need more than just your presence. I need your attention, your care, your willingness to know me. And if that call goes unanswered, it's also about deciding what you're willing to accept, because love without being seen will always feel incomplete. You deserve more than invisibility in the place where you should be known most deeply.